Hello, friends. Hello, friends. A tradition unlike any other.
Oh, my goodness. In your life, have you seen anything like that?
There it is! Adam Scott, a life changer. Mashed potato!
Here it comes.
This is the 19th Tee podcast. Kieran Marsh, Nathan Drudy, back with you after undoubtedly another chapter in the very best competition in golf. Drudster, the Europeans have done it 16.5 to 11.5. Once again, the streak continues of home Ryder Cup victories. We're stretching to 30 plus years now for the Americans since they last won on European soil, and they'll have to wait another 4 years to get back to Adair Manor because it was comprehensive in the end for the Europeans, my friend. Your thoughts off the top?
It was, comprehensive is a good way to describe it, I think. And the tone was set from the very first session on the very first day when the Europeans took all 4 points, and from there they didn't really look back. But yeah, just pure dominance. I know that the US started to work their way back into things a little bit yesterday, but it was as good as gone after really halfway through the whole tournament. Halfway through, it was done. Essentially, we knew that this was the inevitable outcome, and exciting. Just great to see the Europeans win with a team that was, I think we even spoke about it briefly. Certainly not as talented. The talent gap was larger than what was on the US side. So just excited to see them get over the line, and that streak continues for the US.
I had considered opening up with a bit of Europe's on fire, USA is terrified, but I decided against it. I decided to control myself, but it was one of the many chants, I think, that built across the 3 days of competition at Marco Simone that really cemented the magic of a European-based Ryder Cup. It was very special, and to your point, the tone was set, I think, from the outset. Even the decision to go with foursomes. Generally, the Europeans playing at home will open with 4-ball, and Luke Donald backed the strategy and backed the data and backed what that was telling him to roll out a format inconsistent with how they generally open their home Ryder Cup. So to be as good as they were from the outset was incredible, really. And I think to your point, we mentioned in the preview, and I kind of said from memory that, European Ryder Cup victories are built on getting the very best out of players for a 3-day period. And more pointedly, players playing maybe the best golf they have ever played and maybe will ever play. Because generally speaking, the bottom 4 or 5 of the European side on any given day is what decides these competitions. And I thought this was the perfect illustration of the fact that the Europeans are, without doubt, the classic example of the whole being greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah,
that's Luke Donald did an incredible job.
Yeah, spot on. I think you're spot on. Exactly. And I think we saw that there was a lot of rifts, well, supposed rifts, but they're not. We were told that they were the tightest team they've ever been, or closest team that they've ever been in the US. And I think, you look at some of the names that are in that lineup, and it was very much an individual thing for a lot of these guys. And the European team just seemed to have a culture that was far stronger than the US. I mean, standing arm in arm on the first tee and just little things like that all stood out for me anyway.
What incredible. I think I'm just looking here, and we'll probably go into some individuals as we work our way through, but just a really quick recap of points scored per individual. I'm looking at the list here. So Rory McIlroy tops the European side with 4 points gained across the 3-day competition. Tyrrell Hatton and Victor Hovland, 3.5 each. Tommy Fleetwood, 3. John Rahm, 3. And surprisingly there, Robert McIntyre is the next through the gate with 2.5. But we kind of spoke about it in the preview show that, yes, Europe needed to draw the very best out of their, players 9 through 12. But if they were to win, their stars had to hit. None of them could miss. I said that I felt, and we probably both agree, that the person with the most pressure going in on the European side was Rory McIlroy, because he couldn't afford to play the way in which he did at Whistling Straits 2 years ago. He turns out he's the highest point scorer of either side across the entire 3 days. So Rory was brilliant. Rahm was exceptional. Fleetwood, for mine, it's probably the best golf I've ever seen him play, which, is remarkable that he can eclipse his last effort on European soil on a Ryder Cup in France. But he did, in my mind, and obviously probably deservedly so, with the clinching point in singles. But for mine, and I'm keen to get your thoughts here, the clear MVP, and it doesn't bear out in the points, but the clear MVP for Europe for mine was Victor Hovland. He was unbelievable across the weekend, and I think, fresh off winning the Tour Championship and his comfortably best year in majors in 2023, I think he elevated himself to another level again across the last 3 days.
Yeah, tend to agree. I think, only his second time in a Ryder Cup, and it felt as though he was one of the senior players in that team, and he stood up when it really counted, and teamed up with, guys like Ludwig Aberg, in foursomes on both days, and got the win on both occasions. So really taking someone like Ludwig under his wing, and of course that 9-7 victory over Scotty Scheffler and Brooks Koepka was part of that. And then, the way that he played yesterday against Colin Morikawa, who, there were flashes where Colin started to show something, even although he had a pretty lean tournament in totality. But Victor always had the answer, and he was excellent. I think, I was making a case I was just chatting to a mate yesterday about watching Victor play, and I mean, you could tell me right now that he's the best player in the world, and I probably wouldn't have any argument back to that, because he's playing like someone who looks like the best golfer in the world. And I think that's a big call, but I do genuinely believe that he was truly phenomenal this week. And of course, all started with the hole-in-one earlier in the week as well. And he got the crowd pumped up throughout the week. He was getting into it. I thought he showed some really good leadership qualities as well. So yeah, I definitely agree that he was 3 votes v Hovland.
In terms of the other things that stood out to me, I kind of mentioned Robert McIntyre, and I want to probably balance my commentary here. He finishes with 2.5 points. He picked up 2 points. He picked up 1.5 points playing 4-ball with Justin Rose, because obviously he wins his singles 2-1 on the last day as well. But I balance the commentary because I think it's not overstating to say that Rose probably won those 1.5 points in the 4-ball on his own ball. Rose was exceptional in the partnership with McIntyre, not to downplay Bobby Mack, but the emotion that he has shown, it's kind of, I almost think it's a perfect illustration of the difference between the Europeans and the Americans. And this is a guy that grew up in, the little town of Oban in rural Scotland on the West Coast, as a mad keen golfer. All he's ever dreamt of doing was playing the Ryder Cup. And, he spoke after the first day about never feeling a feeling like he felt leaving the driving range and walking to the first tee and walking to make a tee shot he'd been thinking about for 20 years. And you could see what it meant to him when they secured victory overnight, that he was able to get across the line in his singles, that he goes through, to take home 2.5 points into a competition that was a massive question mark hanging over his head. Statistically speaking, he was the worst player entering this week, and that's saying something given Justin Thomas was in the field. But I just think that for mine was a great storyline, because I think, as I said, it embodies the difference between the two teams.
Agreed. Yeah, look, that I've always loved him for a long time, and yeah, really, really pleased that he was able to go out and do what he did throughout the tournament. 2-1 over Wyndham Clark in the final match as well yesterday. Was exceptional for Bobby. The other one I want to call out is Tyrrell Hatton. I thought he was exceptional.
Yeah.
there's a lot made about Tyrrell that he hasn't maybe lived up to some of the hype that he potentially could have. He's only won once on the PGA Tour. Has finished inside the top 10 at majors 5 times, but never really threatened. But he was exceptional. I thought he was really, really good. Great partnership with John Rahm as well. Great in his singles match yesterday against Brian Harman as well to win 3 and 2. But I just thought that he's a guy that can easily get overthrown by the emotion of the whole thing. We know that he's he's a bit of a hothead, but he seemed to quell all of that and just played really good, solid golf. And I don't think he had a loss on the cards. No, 3-0-1. So he was, exceptional all week. Only 3 players had a loss-free record, and that was himself, John Rahm, and Bobby McIntyre, who we were just talking about. So I think, Tyrrell Hatton deserves a hearty pat on the back as well.
Completely agree. I think he's often maligned as well because the manner in which he behaves week in, week out on the PGA Tour or the DP World Tour rubs people up the wrong way. I think the great irony there is that it's perfectly suited to an environment and an arena like the Ryder Cup. It's everything that you want from your players. And, he and probably Shane Lowry juked it out for, waving the flag the hardest for the European team across the 3 days. So I agree with you. I think the irony of that is I believe it's probably the most controlled I've seen him play for a long time. So he had the ability to harness that emotion and that passion and use it as a force for good within the team. But also when it came to his own golf, was incredibly measured, I thought, comparatively to what we've seen a lot out of Tyrrell in the past. So I agree with you. Do see some things coming out of the European camp celebrations. I believe he and Shane Lowry were the last 2 standing, from what I've seen as well, which probably surprises absolutely no one.
No.
With that pair, I'm keen to get your thoughts, Druids, on where you think it was won. And it's interesting because obviously it was an incredible opening session. Only 3 times previously in the entire history of the Ryder Cup had a team started 4 and zip after the opening Friday session. It was the US all 3 times, and they won all 3 times. So Europeans, they did something they'd never done before. And from that point forward, all signs are projecting in the right direction for a victory. But I'm curious to your point where you think it was won, because there certainly was some shifts of momentum across the weekend. It never looked like the Americans were right back in it, but they did manage to draw back some momentum here and there.
Yeah, I thought they got some momentum back coming into Sunday. I think, they picked up 3 of the 4 points on Saturday afternoon in the 4-ball there, and some good wins as well in terms of size. And then Sunday singles, they fought really hard. But I mean, for me, where it was won, it was Friday. It's as simple as that for me. The US didn't win a full point themselves on Friday, and that's just that's astounding. And I know that I put in my day one takes, like, just let's temper expectations here, because this was the same scoreline after day one of the 2019 President's Cup, albeit yes, the Europeans have got a lot more depth than what they were playing with down here at Royal Melbourne for the international team. So they just got the jump on them. And, I wonder now how much of the US side struggles in Europe is now mental and is just built around that. Yeah, it's been 30 years. Okay, now to be 34 years. And, we'll get to a Dare Manor in a couple of years' time, and it'll be, okay, we walk away again, 38 years. And that it just goes on and on and on. And I do wonder if there is, if there is a line in the sand moment, particularly, I'm sure we'll talk about Zach Johnson, but, I think some of the things that he did and his lack of leadership was stark this week. But that's a very roundabout way of saying that I think Friday was genuinely just some of the most impressive golf that I think you'll see in a Ryder Cup, and that's to me is where it was won for the Europeans. The fact that they denied the US a full point, that they didn't win a match. They tied 3 of the 4-ball matches, and that was all grit. I mean, you look at how that finished. The US, they'd won holes 12 and 13 to go 2 up in the Hovland and Hatton, Thomas and Spieth match, and then Hovland and Hatton fight back on 14 and 16, and they get that. Højgaard and Rahm are going toe-to-toe with Scheffler and Koepka, even through 14 holes, and then they trade blows, and the Europeans win it on the 18th. Similarly with McIntyre and Rose, of course, that wonderful putt from Justin Rose to they win 3 of the last 4 holes to tie that match up, and Rory and Matty Fitz go off and win there. So just the way that they scrapped, I thought, was just incredibly impressive, because if the US do get over the line in 2 of those, then all of a sudden the scoreline is a little different, and we're probably still talking about a European win, but it becomes a lot closer than what we thought it was going to be. So long answer short, I think Friday is just really the setup for the whole weekend.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'll probably narrow it down a little further to those 3 tied 4-ball matches in the afternoon. So, America got punched in the mouth in Friday foursomes in the morning. Like, nobody would have expected that they walk back in 4 zip down, but the ability to regroup, go back out, and to your point, really hold control of a number of those matches. I mean, Rory and Fitz were off for the races there for a bit. Fitz on the front 9 in that 4-ball was outrageous. When you consider he'd only ever had 1 previous Ryder Cup experience, it was a complete whitewash, and I hope he never remembers anything. That this is now fresh in his mind of what it is to be a Ryder Cup player, because the difference between his debut and what he has produced over the last couple of days, particularly that first day, was phenomenal. But to your point, Rahm on the 18th, Rose on the 18th, Nicolai Højgaard, there's probably no greater player that had more scrutiny over him coming into this 3 days. And I know we talked about Bob Mack coming in as statistically the worst player, but he was certainly a welcomed and accepted pick from a European fan's perspective because he's so well loved and adored. But that conversation around Højgaard or Meronk going in as the final, the 12th pick from Luke Donald, Meronk having won the Italian Open at the course in the year, getting overlooked. And Højgaard goes out and hits 8 birdies in his Friday 4-ball in the afternoon. Like, now you're looking at the scores, it's the only point he registered was that tie on the afternoon. But realistically, it was so important, and the manner in which he came out, as I said, to go 8 under with all of that focus and pressure on him, playing alongside John Rahm up against Scheffler and Koepka. It goes 8 under in his Friday 4-ball. So I think that broke the hearts, because we ended up the end of day 1, 6.5 to 1.5. And if those 3 go the way they were looking at going, kind of, halfway through the back 9, then we would have been looking at ending the day 5-3. And of course, we go out and we run it back again on 4-ball on Saturday morning. But to your point, the Americans had a great Saturday afternoon. So 5-3 is entirely different than 6.5, 1.5. And I think those 3 halved matches, to your point, the willingness and the determination to see it through, again, epitomised the way in which the European team approaches this competition.
Was there anyone from the European side that maybe didn't tick boxes for you?
Look, I think there was some that were better than others, clearly. But even I'm looking here, Sepp Straka only takes 1 point home in total. He obviously lost his singles on the final day, but I thought his partnership with Lowry both times was excellent. I thought, again, they brought what was great out in each other. Justin Rose, at times, it didn't play like this the entire time across the weekend, but at times looked like he'd wound the clock back a decade. Look kind of like 2012, 2013 Justin Rose, the way in which he was playing. So Look, I think there's contributors here, certainly more than others. But when we turn our attention in a moment to the Americans, and you look at the players that are down the lower end of their points scored, you know, one or less, it's insane, the quality on that side. So I think in comparison, I was really, really impressed with, to the point I made kind of at the start, that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And that's exactly what they did and how they approached this weekend. I just want to touch briefly on Ludwig Aubert, I believe is now the correct pronunciation. He clarified that across the weekend, so it's Aubert. I said that he would be the player we'd be talking about coming out the back end of the tournament. Now, clearly, we've waxed lyrical about probably 5 or 6 names before we've got here. So he's not the top of the list. Takes home 2 points. Was given an unbelievably tough assignment in singles up against Brooks Koepka and ultimately lost that. But I think people watched him play, particularly the way in which he started, like to throw the kid out first morning alongside Victor Hovland, and then the way they won that first game, and then to go 9-7 against, two of the best 5 players in the world the next morning. This is a guy that's had 6 professional starts and never played in a major.
Yeah.
Like this, what he did, this will be the first of maybe 8 Ryder Cups that he plays in, and the way in which he has started. So it's definitely not the top of the list, but I thought it was worth mentioning from a guy who's had, as I said, 6 pro starts. The first player in the history of the Ryder Cup to start in a Ryder Cup before playing a major. I was really impressed with the way he went about his business.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't know how you cannot be, right? He was, immensely impressive, just to take everything in that a Ryder Cup throws at you. As you said, 6 professional starts, hasn't played in a major, hasn't experienced anything like this before, and Luke Donald took a risk here, and it paid off big time for them. I think they could have easily picked someone who's a little bit more mature and been on the tour a little bit longer, but they took a risk here, and I think it's going to pay dividends for them for a long time to come, given that he could be around for the next 5, 6 Ryder Cups for Europe, and he could become a real linchpin in that team. So I was unbelievably impressed with the way that he went about things, and the way that he was able to take everything in his stride and just kick goals all weekend. I thought it showed maturity, far beyond his years, and I know that he lost his singles match to Brooks Koepka, but I'm walk away none less impressed than with Ludwig there.
Just briefly before we turn our attention to the US, I mentioned in passing earlier, but wanted to get your thoughts on Tommy Fleetwood. So we kind of spoke about it in the preview show when we recorded that last Tuesday evening, so a week ago now, when they were having their first practice rounds at Marco Simone for the week, and he was kind of in that pod alongside Rory, and we imagined that was where it was going to go. Ultimately, it's where it did go, and we spoke about how beneficial that would be, most importantly for Rory, really, because he was no longer being asked to babysit the rookie or the young guy or the guy coming in without form. He was matched with an A-lister who could handle the occasion, bring the best out of him, and I think it came to fruition. Like Fleetwood was outrageous. I think, and for as good as he was with Rory, I think it really showed in the singles. Now he was beating up on a relatively lifeless Ricky Fowler, which we'll get to in the singles, but the shot that he hit on 16 to ultimately seal not just his singles game but the Ryder Cup was unfucking believable.
Yeah.
Like it was absurd. Yeah, he was just in a vein of form I don't know that I've seen out of him. Period. Prior to this weekend,
I agree with everything that you've said there, and That was a really important win for them yesterday over for Tommy Fleetwood in his singles match. I know that they were pretty well there. They only needed a half a point or whatever by this stage. But for a period of time there, the US had won 3 or 4 matches in a row. And I'm looking at the scoreboard going, geez, maybe there is a little bit of life left in them as yet. But he just stood up and delivered when it counted most. And that shot on 16, as you said, was just so ballsy. Like with Ricky's ball in the water, there's just no every golf coach or most golf people in the world, when they play match play and their opponent puts their ball in the water, will take the safe option. But he just refused to put the cue in the rack and hit one of the great drives that you'll see, and it was just another foot on the throat from the Europeans. And yeah, I again, there was no love lost this week for Tommy Fleetwood, because he played some sensational golf. I think, what was his final record? Was it 3-1, 3-1 and 0.
3-1.
He had one loss in the 4 balls, and was just phenomenal. Really, really good.
And then just briefly on his playing partner in for a number of those paired formats, Rory to be the top point scorer not only for Europe but across the entire 3 days. I think the pressure he would have put on himself coming into this competition, given his last outing in European colours, what this clearly means to him, and then add in the drama that unfolded as well, to kind of reset and go out and play extremely, extremely well in his singles. He's had a career weekend, I think, and had every intention, I think, of going on. He was very pointed in the team press conference after about the fact there's no greater thing to achieve in golf than a win away from home in a Ryder Cup, and that's what we intend to do at Bethpage Black in 2 years. So certainly has, I think, narrowed his focus around, and we've seen this a lot with Rory about the older that he gets, what's most important. And I thought the way that he played was a bit of a revert back to the norm that we know and expect and love about him as a player in this format.
Yeah, that's fair. I think he was very good. I mean, if Victor was the MVP, I mean, Rory's not far behind, right? He's right on his heels. Just showed tremendous leadership. Of course, I don't think we really know the full story with what happened with Joe LaCava, because there's been a lot of stuff going back and forth about that. But, I was thinking today about Rory a little bit, and, he's not getting any older now. He's not getting any younger. And so these opportunities for him to play Ryder Cups are going to become less and less frequent as we move into the future. He's probably got a few left in him, no doubt. But, there's going to come a time where Europe will have to make a call on some of these guys. So, I'm sure he'd love to get one in the US, as they all would, and that'll be the next challenge in a couple of years' time.
And they'll be absolutely into him. At Bethpage Black, I think the scenes out of Marcos May were excellent across the weekend. Obviously, there was a great deal of crowd involvement around Patrick Cantlay on Saturday, and some of that stuff, particularly on 16, was outstanding. But that will be a picnic compared to what the Europeans will be subject to along the fairways of Bethpage Black in New York in 2 years' time. So, and then obviously post that, he's got a very special one at home in Ireland at Adair Manor. So, look, the future is bright for him. He certainly found that fire. He was a broken man at the end of Whistling Straits, in tears, despite beating Xander Schauffele in the singles, at how poorly he had performed. And I think it's remarkable what he's done individually with his game in the 2 years since, but then to come back in off, knowing that was your last start in European colours, to play the way that he did, was outrageous. So, a really good weekend for him. Probably a good segue, because I said Victor was the MVP for Europe. We both agree that if that's 1A, then surely Rory would be 1B. But one guy who we haven't spoken about at all, who may in fact deserve that title indeed, is the captain. So let me read this to you. This is Luke Donald's Ryder Cup record. As a player, he won in 2004, 2006, 2010, and 2012. So 4 Ryder Cup victories as a player, and wins his first outing as a captain in 2023. 70% point percentage as a player, best of any player with at least 4 appearances since it became Europe versus the US in 1979. He was, with club in hand, built for this competition. And it's not the first time, nor will it be the last, that we see a player that graduates from the playing ranks of Europe, having been an exceptional cog in the wheel as part of their success, to becoming an unbelievable captain. I saw a tweet from our good friend Ewan Porter earlier today. He's played 50 events around the world in the last 14 months with this specific goal of seeing up close. I don't want to watch vision. I don't want to watch the television. I want to see with my own 2 eyes the players that I intend to pick in my team. But the level of preparation he went to, and you see it rewarded, particularly with his captain's picks, like McIntyre 2.5 points, like Aberg 2 points, Lowry 1.5. Like comparatively, we'll get to Zach Johnson in a second. He was exceptional. And already people calling for him to continue on, given there is you're not going to have Westwood, you're not going to have Poulter, you're not going to have McDowell, you're not going to have Sergio. So there is, in Donald's generation, a vacuum of options. There's immediately calls for him to continue on and go again at Bethpage Black. But I thought, as it relates to his counterpart, he was playing chess while Zach Johnson was playing checkers.
He was very, very good, I thought. It's often hard because we see the golf and we don't get to see a lot of that behind the scenes sort of stuff. But from everything that that you've read and heard, and I guess seen through the television, is that he was an exceptional captain, and I think that was reflected in the way that his players went out and played. His leadership was sensational. He rallied the troops. He was he was exceptional. I thought that he's got a lot of credit in the last sort of 24 hours, I guess, maybe 12 hours, 24 hours, and all of it has been deserved, I think. And to your point there, comparatively, Zach Johnson has copped a lot, and probably rightly so. But it'll be interesting to see what they do and make the call, because of course he only stepped into this job not that long ago. With Henrik Stenson was obviously the initial captain before joining Liv, so he obviously only stepped into this role not that long ago, and he took it with both hands and produced an excellent result for the Europeans. So I think it's hats off to Luke Donald and the team at Europe, and that also comes from having good vice captains around him and good people around him as well. It's not all on one person.
So conversely, Drudes, I'm going to read this in full acknowledgement that Zach Johnson doesn't have a club in his hand. He can't hit the shots, but he does and is accountable for and responsible for creating the environment around the players to perform. So Zach Johnson's captain's picks went 4, 12, and 4 on the week. And I think that probably tells the story, because some of the automatic qualifiers had horrendous weeks, but a number of the players that Johnson picked himself were really nowhere to be seen. So if you look at the spread here, Max Homer was the highest point scorer for the US with 3.5, and then even the difference here between the US and Europe. Rory was 4, Hatton was 3.5, Hovland was 3.5, Fleetwood was 3, Rahm was 3, McIntyre 2.5. Homer's the best with 3.5. The next best is 2 for the US, which is Cantlay and Harmon. And then it drops to 1.5, which is Clark, Koepka, Thomas. And then ones, Burns, Morikawa, Scheffler, Schauffele, Spieth, and then an absolute donut for our dear friend Ricky Fowler. So as I said before, like you look at the players who returned 1 point, two-time major winner Colin Morikawa,
Mm-hmm.
you know, a guy who is widely regarded as the best player in the world, and himself a multiple major winner in Scotty Scheffler,
Mm-hmm.
a three-time major winner and all-time American Ryder Cup player Jordan Spieth,
Mm-hmm.
and Xander Schauffele, who alongside Patrick Cantlay has maybe been the best pair that the US have produced of any team format in the last, 5 or 6 years across Ryder Cups and Presidents Cups. So these are guys that all returned 1 point.
Yeah.
Like like, cannot be understated how poor the US performance was. For as good as the Europeans were, and sure the US, particularly today in the singles, managed to peg some back, unsurprisingly, when it's 1v1, but there are very few shining lights here for the US. And I think as it relates to looking back via a review, it will be unkind.
Yeah. I think there's only really one shining light, and that's Max Homer. I think he's out and out the MVP of the US team. I don't think anyone can debate that. I mean, even Cantlay, like the totality of everything that happened, I can't give him a pass mark on the week. I mean, he played some nice golf yesterday and did fight hard. I'll give him that. But in totality, you're talking about whether it's true or not, and I think there's still a lot more to come on this, whether it is true that, that he wanted players to be paid for the Ryder Cup and all this sort of stuff, and there's fractures in the room. Like, I think we're only going off the information we have, and I just can't give him a pass mark on the week. Brian Harman, similarly, largely irrelevant. And then, I think it's telling when a guy like, not taking anything away from Max Homer, right? But when a guy like Max Homer is your leading point scorer, I think there is clearly some issue broader within the team. And then you've got Brian Harman, who's in there off the back of winning one tournament. Yes, it was a major, but he clearly shouldn't be playing a Ryder Cup. Wyndham Clark, same story. These are the guys at the top in the top four in terms of your point scorers. And then your big guns, Koepka and Thomas, combined for 3 points. Xander Schauffele, Colin Morikawa, Scheffler, Spieth. It was bad. It was really bad. And, I feel for Ricky in a way. He only got rolled out once. If you take singles out of it, he only got given one other opportunity to play 18 holes of golf. I don't know. I don't even know where you really look at it. But when guys like Scotty Scheffler and Jordan Spieth and Ricky Fowler do not win a single match, I mean, you're going to be pushing shit uphill. So I think it's as simple as that.
Yeah, so I think to try and contextualize it for people listening in, Colin Morikawa, Xander Schauffele, Scotty Scheffler, and Jordan Spieth combined for the same amount of points as Rory McIlroy.
Yeah, correct.
So that's the difference, right? Is that and we speak about how important it was for the Europeans to get the very best out of their bottom third, but this is what happened 2 years ago, Whistling Straits for Europe. When your stars don't turn up, it's real fucking hard. It doesn't matter how well, your tier 2 players play, because your horses aren't there. Yeah. Your Clydesdales aren't there, right? Correct. And so, look, whatever the mystery illness was that was floating around,
excuses Johnson.
it does appear as though Ricky Fowler was the worst hit by that. Reports of eating separately in the dining room, stay away from his teammates, et cetera, et cetera. So I think missed a team meeting again, not to be able to spread germs. So look, the way Ricky played against Tommy Fleetwood probably bears out. He looked a shadow of himself, to be honest, and certainly not like the player was picked for this team based on how he's played this year. But then, above him, Cantlay was good on. So I mean, he was better than good. He was enormous on Saturday afternoon, birdieing 16, 17, and 18 to flip that game and win it 1-up in the 4-ball. But largely unimpressive to your point. And then one person I will say, he only took home 1.5 points, but I actually thought JT, given the manner in which he entered this competition, played pretty well and gave him a bit of juice when they were absolutely lifeless. Like, he was trying. What you saw, I think, was, okay, yeah, I remember now. I get why he got picked. And it's not even really about like getting to the end of a match and having that point. It's the manner in which he drags the team along in the 18 holes or the 16 holes, however long his match goes. It got a little bit tiresome. Like, I feel like he rolled out the fake hat tip like 8 times in his singles match.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, we get it.
Yeah.
It's a little bit boring, but I think he played his role in that sense. Like, Homer did it from his play, whereas Thomas did it from because there was the European side was full of them guys, shouting their balls off all weekend. But the Americans had one, and he played his role. So I think credit where it's due, particularly given the scrutiny his selection was under. I thought he played a role, albeit not necessarily returning a lot of points.
No, that's fair. I just wonder sometimes, and maybe this is a segue into Zach Johnson, but I just wonder sometimes how continually people go back to the well when things aren't working. Like Thomas and Spieth, right? 3 matches together. It's this thing that's like, it's a bit like Xander and Patrick Cantlay. Now, they were excellent here at the President's Cup, and they weren't terrible. But JT and Spieth, 3 matches for half a point. Like, it wasn't good. And like after the second one, I was like, okay, all right, we're going back for another go. We're gonna keep persisting with it. It was just some interesting decisions made by Zach Johnson, but I think picking up your point on JT, totally fair. I expected very little of him coming in, and he did show a little bit of heart, particularly when so many were failing around him. Particularly the Friday and Saturday morning. I mean, let's not forget that, Friday was dominant, but Saturday morning started just as dominant for the Europeans. I mean, Rory and Fleetwood got rid of JT and Spieth, and Victor and Ludwig won 9 and 7 over the best player in the world in Brooks Koepka.
Yeah.
So, it was
unbelievable. I think, conversely, I don't think JT was provided an awful lot of assistance by his partner.
No, totally.
Jordan had an all-time poor weekend. My beautiful boy Jordan was horrendous, and surprising because you cast your mind back. He kind of came into Whistling Straits 2 years ago, like he hadn't really started to turn the corner all that much. He barely, but it was a questionable. Oh, geez, like this is really a reputation pick, and he played really well at Whistling Straits because he based on previous form, loves this competition, but he was nowhere across the 3 days. I thought he was really, really poor. I don't think he did JT any favours, but I don't necessarily think, to your point, Zach Johnson did either of them any favours by continuing to put them out together. There were some head-scratching decisions, to your point, to persist when everything is telling you that a change needs to be made. So just to round back to Max Homer, he obviously President's Cup at Quail Hollow was his team debut for the US, and now obviously this was his debut Ryder Cup. So across those 2 team formats in the last 2 years, he is 7-1-1. We may have a genuine certified match play dog in Max Homer. Loves
can
the
play. Yeah.
And to the point, like it was a boat race for the Americans over the internationals at Quail Hollow, but this, like, to my earlier point, they were getting punched in the face. So he does it both ways. He does it when they're leading. He does it like trying to fight from behind to like drag his team back into the competition. So he was super, super impressive, Max Homer.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think after after the loss in the first match that he played, I mean, he tied in his four ball. He was part of the only foursomes team that won with Brian Harmon from the US side on the second day there over Lowry and Straka, and then also won that afternoon as well. So yeah, he was excellent. Clearly a shining light for the US, and easily 3 votes for M Homer.
Is there anything else from a US playing, or do you need to, or feel the want to go any further into Zach Johnson?
Not
or
really.
Anything else from the US perspective?
Not really. I think I've said my piece on Zach Johnson. I thought he was very ordinary as a captain, and it probably only cemented what my thoughts are of him. I mean, I think I've told this story in the show before that, we went to a dinner at the President's Cup, and he spoke, and it was about the time that Bryson was going through his big bulk up, and he got asked a question and people started booing, and he basically threw the toys out of the cot and was like, well, I'm not going to answer any more questions then. And like, just childish stuff. Like, when you come to Australia, like, you've got to expect some sort of, ridicule. And, people ask me about Patrick Reed because that's when that all happened. So I haven't had a very good impression of Zach Johnson. And yeah, I don't think many people will after this weekend either, because he didn't really show too much. So that will be my final piece on Zach Johnson.
And I won't add anything to it further. You've summarised it well. So there's probably not a great deal more to go through as it relates to the Ryder Cup. I did want to get your thoughts on the course, because there were some questions, I think, about it going in, as there always is. I mean, I think invariably every 2 years there'll be questions about how and to what extent the host team has tricked up the course. And there were some questions about that here. We spoke a bit about the fact that it was originally built in the 90s, redeveloped in 2018 with the entire focus of this tournament. Like, moved every hole bar the 6th in terms of either location or orientation or both. So it undergone an enormous amount of redevelopment and reconstruction. So I've got some pretty distinct thoughts on it, but I'm curious to hear yours as it relates to the course itself and how it played out over the 3 days.
Yeah, I actually thought it played really well as a match play course. Some of the decisions that were posed at players, particularly coming down the stretch, I think the back 9 in terms of match play posed more questions than the front did. But there was a lot of different ways to approach it, and you saw guys who approached holes with different strategies coming out with the same score, and I think that's the sign of a good match play golf course. That if someone wants to have a crack, or if someone wants to lay back, you can both make the same score, and there was that happened on plenty of occasions. I mean, there's standout holes, 16 clearly. I mean, it was so much fun to watch that and just see how guys went about it. 17 I really liked as well. I mean, like, I'm not going to sit here and rattle off all the holes that I liked, but I thought as a match play course, it was really, really good, and they nailed the redevelopment, reconstruction of it, to suit for this.
I couldn't agree more. So I think if you looked at it through the lens of what I said, and that was the redevelopment was done entirely with this competition in mind. I think as a match play venue, as a Ryder Cup venue, and probably also as a made for TV venue, because the Ryder Cup is great, particularly ones played in Europe, but it is a television product. Like, I think it's difficult when you go, there's 40,000 people there. It's not one of those ones where you're generally following groups around. It's a great fan experience in terms of seeing a lot of golf. It's a great fan experience for a variety of other different reasons, but really it's built for the viewer. And I thought the course was exceptionally well prepared and well thought out with that in mind. I think the amount of, we saw it on Friday afternoon, as we said, for Europe to flip 3 games. We saw it with Cantlay to go birdie, birdie, birdie coming home. There were opportunities, to your point, on that back 9, 16 to drive a par 4, 17 a great par 3. that's exactly what you need the Ryder Cup to be. But I think there was just some awesome questions to your point as well. I thought the way they set up 7 last night, the singles with the pin placement in kind of that middle plateau was unreal because it produced like Rory's tee shot last night in the singles on 7 was out of this fucking world to put it within essentially gimme distance.
Yeah.
In a 3-tiered green with the pin bang in the middle of the kind of plateau table. It was absurd. So I really enjoyed what it produced golf-wise, across the 3 days, and also just pretty to look at, beautiful part of the world. So, yeah, I thought Marco Simone was excellent. Excellent.
Agreed. What else you got?
I don't want to relitigate Hatgate because I think it's been done to death. And the more I think about it, it's probably, to be honest, a bit of a nothing burger. But I did probably just want to touch on Joe LaCava's behaviour.
Okay.
Because
run me through it.
I've seen kind of 2 streams of thought. I've seen like people react probably similarly to the way in which Rory reacted in the car park at Marco Simone, like absolutely incensed. And then I've heard a train of thought, albeit predominantly from American commentators and American fans, saying that's just part and parcel of the Ryder Cup. It's not like a regular PGA Tour event or a major. It's you got to take that with a grain of salt. I think the best one I heard was, Cantlay was subject to it for 18 holes, so why can't Rory put up with it for 30 seconds? So I've seen some pretty polarizing opinions. I'll be really clear because I'm not grey. I thought his behaviour was a fucking disgrace, to be honest. Like an absolute fucking disgrace. And I would have expected more from a guy who's been doing that job for a long, long, long time. Yeah. This is not his first Ryder Cup, not his first major event.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm not at all surprised that both Rory and Paddy Cantlay came out and won their singles because there was a lot. I would have loved to see them play together.
Oh, yeah.
I just it would have been weird to kind of do this and not mention it. And we don't need to go into great depths, but I'm incredibly clear that I thought it was woefully poor behaviour from Joe LaCava.
Oh, I totally agree. I think you've summed it up perfectly there, and I don't need to reiterate your thoughts, but I just don't understand how that's just even appropriate, or even just anyone can think that that's. Yeah, and the line of questioning that, well, Patrick Cantlay put up with it for 18 holes, yeah, but that was from the fans, not a caddy.
Correct.
Not someone.
Correct.
Not someone inside the ropes. Look, I agree. I've just, put me down for a ×2 on everything that you said because it was awful. It was awful.
Wonderful. Anything else? I mean, for me, it's probably just the overall arching feeling of like this is and has been reinforced, and I feel like we said it after Whistling Straits. We definitely said it after Le Golf National. Every second year, we get reminded of how good this event is, and there's nothing else like it, and it leaves you yearning for more match play golf. And we've been so fortunate that in consecutive weekends, we've had an awesome Solheim Cup into an awesome Ryder Cup. I think it's without peer. Like, particularly ones played in Europe, they're different. They have a different tenor, a different tone, different environment and atmosphere. And it was awesome. The last couple of days, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, agreed. I was talking to a mate about the Ryder Cup as well, and I was like, it's clearly the best event in golf. And I said, like, I still at times, like, because I don't have an affiliation with either team, right? I'm from Australia. I'm not European and I'm not American. Like, I find it hard to really resonate with pulling for the European team. I think we just do it because we just don't want to see the Yanks win. I think that's
100%.
That's as simple as it is.
100%.
So like for me, sometimes I see the President's Cup and I'm like, yeah, come on, like I've got a dog in the fight. But it's just so much fun to watch. Like I love getting up and about for the people who care, and I know that the President's Cup doesn't have the same juice as what a Ryder Cup does, but this has made me excited for 2024's President's Cup, even though it is officially it's the international's turn to host, but we're going to Canada, which is just a great waste of time. I think team golf remains undefeated. It's as simple as it is. So bring on
and just on that
Royal Montreal
briefly. Royal Montreal, as it relates to Royal Montreal and Mike Weir's international team, bit of a segue. I'm not sure if you saw the news over the weekend, but in the team, there was actually more team golf across the weekend at the Asian Games currently underway. And Siwoo Kim and Sung Jae Im claimed gold for South Korea, which officially exempts them from the compulsory military service in South Korea. So it was getting pretty tight. It was looking increasingly less likely they were going to, because it was about a gold medal, or really any medal in Tokyo, and then it was, can you win a major? And I think it was just like, shit, if you can win a medal at the Asian Games, we'll exempt you. And they've gone and done it. So you would imagine, barring any sort of injury, touch wood, or complete lapse in form, that both Siwoo Kim and Sung Jae will be a big part of Mike Weir's plans for the international team next year. It's good news that we'll have them available to us and not frog marching in uniform.
Yes, agreed.
Along the DMZ. So that's good news.
Agreed.
That'll probably do us, Strudes. We will have another episode coming in a day or two's time, because the Australian season in earnest. We had the NT PGA Championship a month ago. And now we're into kind of a regular cadence starting this week over in your neck of the woods with the WA Open. So we'll be back in a couple of nights' time with a quickfire preview of that tournament. That's kind of the cadence that we'll get into now as these tournaments roll. We'll have a look at the tournament coming up kind of later in the week. And then kind of on your Monday night, it'll be a look back at the tournament that's just gone from the Australian summer perspective. So we did kind of telegraphed that a week or two ago, that the focus definitely now will be on the Australian Games. It should be across what's shaping as an incredibly busy and exciting summer of golf. So we're looking forward to that getting underway in earnest at Journal Up. Good old Journal Up. Which is going to ask some questions. So keep an ear out for a preview of that in a night or two's time. Drew, thank you for your company. It's been wonderful as always to wrap up our favourite event in the game. It was an awesome couple of days of golf from Marco Simone. Bring on Bethpage Black. It's going to be an absolute fucking circus in New York, but we wouldn't have it any other way. So just recapping, a 16.5 to 11.5 victory for the good guys. Tip of the cap to Europe. Tip of the cap to you, my friend. Pleasure as always.